So, welcoming everyone. This is the third episode from the Balance podcast. I'm G.Abdelrahman, the host of this podcast, and this is our third episode. The first one was from Sudan, the second was from Saudi Arabia, and today it's a very different episode. We are moving to Germany. So I'm really excited having Leon Walther with me today. Leon Walther is a PhD student at York University in the UK, but he is from Germany. So the floor is yours, Leon. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
So I think this is your first podcast in with with Arabs.
Yeah, I think it's generally the first podcast I ever do. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I've never done some where I'm part of it. So it's quite interesting.
Yes, just to say that I know Leon from the British Society for Parasitology. We are working together in the Trips Club. So yes, he's always the host, but right now he will be my guest.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting to be on the other perspective now, from the other side.
thank you. So today we have 5 themes. The first one is identity beyond the profession. The second one is masculinity and inner growth. The third one is global issues and inner balance. The fourth is Islam, the Arab world, and the West. And the final one is legacy and purpose. So I will keep all the questions at the end of the episode. Please, if you have any question, just write it in the group. But let's start with the first theme, which is identity beyond the profession. So could you, Leon, tell us a little more about you? Who is Leon outside of the lab?
Well, outside of the lab, I'm actually, I would say, like a passionate reader. So I would say most of my free time, I would spend a lot of time reading about anything I can find which is interesting. I love traveling, basically, like just to get to know other cultures. So I try to diversify my countries which I'm visiting as much as possible to learn new languages or meet new people, confront myself with new cultures, and yeah, that. And I think on the other side, I have a very good friend circle here, so I spend a lot of time with my friends. Mostly either we cook things together or we play games in a pub here in England. We watch movies, this kind of thing. And yeah, I would also say I'm very sportsy, so I do a lot of sport, especially football currently. In the past it was volleyball, but in England volleyball is not a big thing, so I switched back to football. So yeah, and I love nature, hiking, those kind of things. Like that's really like my biggest kind of character.
That's really interesting, and you have many things to do, and I think that's why you are a great speaker to be today with me. So
Thank you.
As you said, you love to read. So could you tell us what's the final book or the book that changed the way you see the world or the way you see yourself?
So I think the book which had the biggest influence on my mentality, or I always say is my most favorite book, is called One River by an author called Wade Davis. So Wade Davis is a Canadian who's a anthropologist, specifically like an ethnobotanist. But the book is basically about the travels of his former boss, who basically traveled through whole Latin America more or less, and studied the indigenous populations there and described their habits, like their cultural traditions, and how they use like plants in their daily life. And what I learned from it is that contrary to like European-centric mentality, where I would say technological advancements and generally that kind of thing describes the advancement of a culture, this book really opened my eyes that like cultures are always intrinsically interesting and are not judged to be from any perspective, but we have to see them in a relative way, like from their own kind of history and environmental conditions and everything what is basically shaping a culture. So I think that was really like what has changed a lot my mind about how to approach and be interesting towards other cultures and try to understand them and not judge them and really see each culture individually as kind of something which is precious and should be kind of conserved and like appreciated in the way they are. So that was really like a book which has had a big influence on my mentality, I would say.
That's really interesting, and I'm curious to know how old are you when you read this book?
I think I was 21, 20 or 21 I was when I read that book.
Okay. That's really interesting, but I would like to read that book. So if you can share it, the link, or again the name of the book in the comments, that would really be helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's also when people want to read this book, there's also worth having a look at a guy called Franz Boas, who's basically like he kind of approached this topic of like cultural relativism from a scientific and philosophical point of view. So he described that first and shaped this kind of mentality. So if people are interested in general, like finding out about this topic, I think reading about Franz Boas and reading One River by Wade Davis is really like a key to open your world about this. I will share it with you, of course.
Okay, so, and you are someone who are really curious about discovering the other cultures. Do you feel like your personal identity and your professional are in harmony? You are a PhD student and you are working in the lab. So
Well, I mean,
how you can manage
yes.
those worlds together?
Well, of course, it's complicated to be at home and being in the lab, and living a scientist life at home. But I think the general basics of to be a scientist is the most important trait is like to be curious. If you're
I
not
agree.
curious, you can't be a scientist, in my opinion, because that's the foundation of why we do science. And I think that really fits to also like, I mean, and that's why I would say that is in harmony with my general character, because I think curiosity has always driven me in my whole life. When I talk with my previous neighbors, when I was like 4 years old or 5 years old, they would always tell me like I was not a kid who would just accept answers. I would just always ask why would you do that? Um, so apparently, even as a young boy, I was a person who was very curious to understand why people do what they want, even though I cannot remember any single second of that, which is actually quite funny for me. But yeah, I think that is in harmony for sure. Maybe also that I love cooking, and cooking is a bit of like laboratory science, but more freestyle than following strictly a recipe. So I
So
definitely
you
think,
are a scientist by nature.
yes, I think so. I would have always described myself as like, if I'm something, I want to be a scientist.
Okay, that's very great. So let's move to the next theme, which is masculinity and inner growth. And what would be a balanced and healthy version of masculinity look like to you?
I made my thoughts about that, and generally, I always think about what is actually masculinity and where does this idea come from. And I think I never really agreed that we even should think about in a certain way that masculinity is something we should pursue as a term, which is important because, in my opinion, if we shape words like that, I mean, masculinity is interpreted probably in every culture in a very different way. And I think there's no generally accepted like term what is including masculinity. So I think it's often like a cultural or society kind of imposed way of how we should describe the behavior of man and how it would be perfect for the cultural aspects. And I think I'm someone because I never really wanted to accept that I have to fit certain society norms in a general way, especially growing up in a rural village in Germany, and trying to fight against the mentality or like certain behaviors there. I never really made my thoughts about that I want to follow a certain masculinity type, but just I think everyone should just behave the way they feel most comfortable with. And if that's against a certain type of masculinity, as we would describe it, it's totally fine. I mean, I think just everyone should behave the way they feel most comfortable with, and they're not harming anybody else. So yeah, that's my idea about. I mean, it's not really an answer to your question, but it's more like I think that the term masculinity itself is like very difficult to say for me.
Yes, I can relate to what you have said, but do you think that at least masculinity have a common things that men share, and then the differences between men coming after those common things?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's like always a discussion about what really men have to be or how they should behave. I guess in a general traditional context, as the person who takes care of the family and provides like money and works and
Yes.
feeds the family, it's kind of the traditional way of thinking. But in Germany, for example, it's also very accepted that the woman takes over the job because she's maybe better paid and the man takes over to share care for the kids. And I think that's definitely masculinity itself as well, because I mean, when I would say something, what is masculinity? It's always about like that you can also be or show female sides, and that you have the courage to basically break up the society norm.
Okay, so from your point of view, have you ever had to unlearn something you once believed about what a real man should be?
That's I don't know. That's the thing. I would say like, especially in Germany or like where I'm from, it's not very typical that it's like classically accepted that a man, for example, can cry in public or that you show a lot of feelings. That you have to be strong and like mentally like strong, especially. So in this case, I mean, I know myself, and I'm not a person who would like cry in public, but it's something which I actually hate about me. So in this case, I actually embrace more like things which are not really seen as like the classic masculinity type of people in the country or the culture where I was born. Um, so it's actually the vice versa. So I've realized that there are certain things where I would probably fit in the classic context of I'm masculine, but I actually don't want to be that, because I think it's very healthy to show emotions in public and cry and like be like show your vulnerability and human being to everyone and show your weaknesses. So there's not really
Yes.
something where I'd say that I want to follow a certain masculinity type.
Yes, and I realize that from your answers that you shared common discussion that I hear today in Arab's world. So when I'm discussing with men, uh, and even that they are from Arab region, but I hear the same answers. So I believe that either that masculinity, it's you said it's something that may differ between cultures, but from my perspective, I believe that there are common things that I can relate to any culture.
Yeah, I guess that's especially related to, for example, that the man has probably in every culture kind of the role of like providing for the family,
Yes.
and like being the emotionally like stable part, which is like doesn't matter what happens and like whether very like horrible situations happen, that you are like the kind of the rock which is keeping the stability in the family and provides with support. And so I think maybe that's like in every culture that has kind of turned out to be like, probably also because in a generally like in every, I mean, woman Usually the make are the mothers, they take care of kids, so they are not really able to work and provide for the family in that sense. And that's just like probably an evolutionary natural thing. So from an ancient point of view, the man has always been the provider. In this case, had to take roles over, which probably very common among every culture.
Mhm. And I believe that that is a big discussion.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I
So
would
yes.
definitely.
Mhm. So let's move into the last question. Is the same. If your younger self could see the man you have become today, what do you think he would be surprised by or proud of or even
I think
impressed?
so. I think when I think back when I was like 13 or 12 or 14, when I actually developed my passion and my interest for science, I was always
Mm-hmm.
the kid who would sit in like everywhere and reading like science newspapers, and then I saw the authors and the people who actually made the science, and I looked them up and saw that the PhD students or postdocs and working at like scientific facilities. And back then, when I was 12 or 13, that was like the coolest thing. Like maybe some people were like really fancy nerds of like singers, like I don't know, maybe Shakira or whoever. And I was like this kid
Yes.
who would always like admire scientists, and now I'm basically in the same position where I actually be this person who does a PhD and does science. Um, so I think in this case, I probably have exactly followed the dream I always wanted to be. And like, I think if I would now go
Mm-hmm.
back being 13, I would probably be very happy and like, um, proud of me that I became this person I've always admired. Surprising, I would say that I was in the past a very introverted person, and now I'm quite extroverted. So I think I would have never
Mm-hmm.
expected in the past to be like a very outgoing person who approaches people and is like very talkative and feels happy to be surrounded by a lot of different cultures and people to share and like learn. I've never been like that. When I was younger, I was just sitting alone everywhere and be my own. So I think that has changed a lot, and I would be probably very surprised about being the person now.
Yes, I can relate to the part of introversion because I'm also that person who are passing or have who is already passed from introversion into extroversion, and I really felt much better.
But
So
it's
I'm curious.
interesting where this
Mhm.
comes from, no?
What could you hear again, please?
Ah, sorry, no, it's just interesting how why
Uh,
people change from being introverted to being extroverted. I mean, what has happened that you change in a character that much? I find it very interesting. Try to understand that still.
yes, but at the same time, I kept the strings point of introverts.
For example,
Um, okay, I engage with people, but I know that my inner strength is coming from sitting with myself
okay,
and
yeah.
have a polite uh, or have time with myself. So although that I'm okay with having time with much of people, but in the reality, I really gain my real strengths from myself, not from anyone outside.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's very important that you are able to spend time with yourself, and like, I mean, that's why I have so many
Mhm.
hobbies, and also hobbies which are like for people who are alone. I think it's very important to spend time with yourself, and you have also a lot of time to think about yourself and like recapitulate your own character, and I think
Mhm, yes.
it helps a lot. It's very important in my opinion. I also love to spend time just for myself and just go for a
Mhm.
walk and just think about random things.
And you don't impress that you can feel you can sit with yourself. That's very normal for us as introverts.
No, absolutely, I agree. I mean, I
Mhm.
know people who are not able to spend alone time with themselves because they get crazy.
Yeah.
I guess that's a sign of an extrovert, or I don't know, but yeah, I think for introverts it's very normal that they love to be with themselves and
Mhm.
just spend time somehow in any way they love to do.
Okay, so let's move into the third theme. So it's about global issues and inner balance. So have you ever felt pulled in too many directions, such as between personal growth, global issues, career, relationships. And did you find balance?
Yes, it's, all those aspects are actually very important in my life, and I always feel like in the conflict among, like, I make myself thoughts about everything, and somehow everything worries me. And I find
Mhm.
it's very difficult to find a balance to, like, address everything in the way I want to, or like, because you feel so generally frustrated that many things you can actually not change, or you're very powerless because they're
Yes.
just systematic, or like in areas where you have no access to. So I think that's the biggest problem I see always, is like this feeling of powerlessness. The only way to tackle that is to basically open your voice and like talk with friends and families about the topics, and like actually realize that many people do care about the same and they have the same thoughts. It's just very difficult to express them and make them public. Um, for example, with the Palestine conflict, I went to to protest against the horrible things which happened down there, the violence in general. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's important to open up your voice and to raise your worries about the situation. But at the other side, of course, it's very difficult to like balance that out because it's just so emotionally draining. Um, so yeah, I think the only way to really tackle that is like to talk with family and friends, and like see that other people care as much as you do. I think that's very like balancing and like caring, even though it doesn't really change at the end the whole situation for the people.
Yes. You have already answered my next question, which is, do you believe it's possible to care deeply about global issues, such like Palestine or Sudan, and still protect your own mental and emotional well-being? And it's really impossible.
Yeah, it is kind of
Mhm.
impossible, to be honest. I think every human being who has has the heart at the right place, or any kind of like um sense for like humanity, would be
Mhm.
like deeply like terrified about the things which are happening in many parts of the world. Especially Sudan and Palestine, also like what's happening in Thailand and Myanmar, Cambodia, or in like many conflict zones in the world. It's very difficult
Yes.
to see because there's so
Mhm.
many bad things happening, and especially me, like growing up in Germany, being in a country during a time where there's no war. I really grew up in a high privileged situation. I probably was born in the best time in the history of Germany, where you have like high economic growth and like high security and no war. And I think it's we forget very quickly that this situation, or that you're born in this place, is like such a low probability, but it's just that you're really privileged that most of the parts of the world actually are not like that, and it's very quickly to forget. So yeah, I think that is like a very frustrating thing, and there's no way that you cannot just ignore that. At least not me.
Yes, and I believe, from my perspective, it's much harder when you personally passing through those events, because I personally exposed to the war when I was in Khartoum, and then went outside, and that's felt guilty, and because I have to set my new life on that new country, and at the same time I have to care about uh, my people on Sudan, and that's very conflicting. So yes,
Yeah, I
it's
think,
uh, it's a
yeah, I'm
big
always
discussion.
very like I'm very impressed, and like I have a huge respect in people like you, and like really people who are in the middle of those kind of situations, and they have so many. Usually you have other worries, like you wanna have your family healthy around you, you wanna pursue your own dreams, and then you have a horrible war around you, which basically destroys all those kind of perspectives usually.
Mhm.
Um, like to cope with that, and to have like a positive view along the future. I think that's
Yes,
like
exactly.
very, very like I have a huge respect of the people who maintain this kind of optimism and like still try to pursue everything they dream about.
Yes, exactly. So, do you have any daily or weekly habits that help you to stay connected to yourself while staying active in the world?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of them, to be honest. Um, I'm really a person of habits. I really enjoy them. I think it's very German, maybe, because I think we like routines and habits. But for me specifically, it's for example that every Wednesday I go to yoga, or like Fridays I have mindfulness. So that's something which is like really part of my key schedule during the week, which is very nice because it's like always an hour where I can just switch off my brain and prepare for the day. Um, I also enjoy like every Saturday, for example, usually I would go in a cafe, in my favorite cafe, and just sit there and drink a coffee and read my books. Um, it's usually a very calm place, so that is something which I've probably done for the last 1.5 years or 2 years since I live in York. I do that nearly every Saturday. Then I play a lot of football. I would say like every Friday evening I have a football match with the department, where we play like a department league in the university. And that's something where, I mean, I know all my team colleagues and all the other colleagues, but everyone is the same opinion that even though it's just 1 hour playing football, which is usually more for fun, and certainly there's a competition about it, but for everyone it's very important. I know people who have changed their flights because they wanted to play the most important game of the season. Um, so like people take
Interesting.
that very serious, even though it's really not like that you would say you need to change a whole flight with your family. Um, so I like that. It's like really like this little community of like football players from the university, and it's very healthy. It helps everyone to like have something to looking forward on a Friday evening. Um, yeah, and usually I have Saturday mornings also before I go reading in the afternoon. I go to my little market here around the corner where some little producers sell their products like eggs or vegetables or whatever you would like. So that is something where I usually go every Saturday morning as well. That is something reminds me of
A lot of
home.
activities.
Yeah, so I mean that's not all actually, but that are kind of really like the main weekly activities I have, and I think they're very important to me. Like they give me really like a nice like organization of the week and something to look forward.
Yes. So, um, I purposely didn't include anything about your study or the PhD, anything not scientific, but I'm really curious about how your life is in York is different from Germany.
Yeah, this is actually I don't know to
It's
be
not a
honest.
listed question, I know.
Um, no, I mean, think I always adapt to the country where I live in. I mean, I have lived in New Zealand and I have lived in France, and every country I adapt to what the local requirements are or what the natural cycle is there. I have realized that everywhere I am, I completely changed my nutrition. Like in France, I have eaten completely different things of what I'm eating now in England, and in Germany, I've eaten completely different things of what I've eaten before. And because everywhere you have other access to food or like the other like for example in England you have a lot of Asian influences, so you can eat a lot of Asian food, which was in my village where I grew up absolutely not the case at all. Um, so but I think in generally I have very similar habits. My life has not changed too much. I was always a person who has read a lot and loved to sit in cafes. Everywhere I was, I have done sports in France, in Germany, in New Zealand. Um, so I wouldn't actually say it has changed a lot. It's just the people around me who have changed a lot, of course, because you're always surrounded by different people. But that's it,
Yes,
actually.
this is an answer of a real introvert.
Exactly. That's what I think as well.
Okay, so let's move into theme four, which is Islam, the Arab world, and the West. So, I know that you visit Morocco, and particularly um, the Al Hamra Palace, and you have a growing interest into the Arab world. So, when and how did you have a growing interest in Islam and the Arab world begin?
Um, sorry, my throat is a bit dry. Um, so I think everything started actually during the Arab Spring. I think that was
Mhm.
2011 or 2012, I think.
Yes.
Well, I saw everything in the news. But until then, I had basically hardly any clue about those countries and what's going on. And I started to see those news, and I actually got interested in what is happening there. For example, during my high school time, we had to give presentations, which were graded, and I did my presentations in political subjects and did a talk about Syrian civil war and the Libyan civil war.
Mm-hmm.
And because politics nowadays you can only understand if you understand history, because everything comes from history. So I started reading, for example, a book called from Albert Hourani, who's like a scholar from Oxford, and he wrote a book about the history of the Arab people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the first time that I actually read deeply into the history and culture of like the Arab kingdom and like how everything developed from the origins of the Arab kingdom towards the Ottoman Empire until nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually how everything developed, and was also the curiosity and the need to just understand what's going on. It's like the scientist mode in me.
Yes, scientist mindset.
Yeah.
And did you visit any other countries other than Morocco?
Not yet, no. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
of all the Arab countries I've visited, it's only Morocco, because to be honest, I don't know. It was also more a coincidence because I had a friend there doing an abroad semester, and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
visit her, and it was the perfect opportunity to see a country. I want to visit more. I mean, I would have loved to go to Syria, Iraq, visit the old bazaars, and like really see like those historic cities and temples and everything. But I think
Mm-hmm.
currently it's just impossible to travel as a Western person, as a backpacker in those countries. So that's something which I find very sad actually. And I have my uncle, for example, he told me that when he was younger, he traveled in Baghdad, in Basra, in Iraq in general, and he really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it. And the people there were absolutely awesome. And I would love to do the same, but I think currently it's just not really possible. I always thought to go to Tunisia. That is something which I always have in my mind, to go traveling there. But it's also a matter of like time and money and like how I can organize that.
Yes.
But it's definitely on my list.
So I'm curious to know, although that uh, um, I have been working with people from the West since 2022, but I'm really curious to know what are Europeans most curious to know when they meet Arabs or Muslim. Not just the questions they ask, but I mean the deeper things they are trying to understand, maybe.
I mean, I would say, I mean, generally Europeans, we're also quite diverse. So if you ask a Polish person, he will probably say
Mm-hmm.
different things as Germans. Also because in Germany we have actually quite a significant Arab population, so we are much more confronted with them and
Mm-hmm.
probably have a different view on them like Polish people. But in generally, I think I mean, during my time when I grew up in Germany, the topics which were always the most relevant ones in media and generally what people discussed was always this sense for democracy, the sense for women rights, the expression of personal freedom. Um, Also, like all the habits with which Muslims have, like praying, for example. I think it's like like if you're really strict, you pray 5 times a day.
Yes.
Then like all the food rules, because in Germany we basically have no rules about food. The clothing rules, which we don't have in Germany either. That you guys have like different law system. I mean, the Sharia is basically the law system of the Islam um, culture and religion. So I think all those things, because I mean they're different to what we know in Europe. So I think all those things are like something which people were interested in to understand and like talked about it in context of Islam, of course.
Mhm. So you are open to, I mean, in Germany, in your culture, uh, are you just giving it to yourself, but you are opening to discuss those things with Muslims themselves and ask them about, for example, hijab, prayers, and so on?
I'm very sure people do, yes.
Mhm.
And probably it doesn't happen on a systematic way. So it's not like that there's like, I think the state or the system promotes that. I think it's everyone's own kind of motivation to ask their Muslim friends of maybe why they do that if they are curious enough.
Mhm.
But I think the general, like, if there have ever been issues, and there have been issues, of course, between like viewpoints about different religious beliefs and so on. It's often, I think, because we just don't understand each other's culture, and like we just have not communicated well enough why we do certain habits. And especially also during, I mean, in Germany during 2015, 2016, when we had a lot of um, um, refugees coming from Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq to Germany. I mean, there was a huge discussion about, of course, problems which arose, and that many people didn't like that so many people from other cultures come into Germany. And you really saw the people who complained about this and raised up certain issues is like you see that they didn't understand really the culture. They were like just afraid of
Mhm.
something because I guess because it's different, you feel fear. But I think what most of the society, I wouldn't say that was most of the society. Many people actually really helped those people and they were really curious and saw that as kind of a curiosity to learn about those cultures. And there was a huge wave of help for those people. So even though
Mhm.
many people think there were problems, but that was the minority, I would say, of the Germans who actually saw that as an issue. But those who had an issue, I think they just didn't understand anything about the cultures. They have never talked with a Muslim themselves, and they were just a bit prejudiced of like what they heard from other sources.
Mhm. And if you had to explain the West to someone in the Arab world who had never been there, how would you do it? And and I know that the West is very general, very uh, general, but let's focus maybe um, into Germany.
Sure, I mean, I would say that generally what we describe as the West is just like a very, I mean, the diverse countries, of course, but we all share like a political system and an economic system, which is like very
Mm-hmm.
similar, which we describe, of course, as democracies and capitalism. So I think that are like that is the main foundation of all the Western countries. Um, and I think the biggest values which we, based on those systems, of course, share are like individual freedom, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
like also the freedom of pursuing a career or like expressing any kind of life choices and sexuality and so on. So it's a lot about individual freedom and like rights. Um, so that is for sure how I would describe the West, but all the consequences out of that is like, because capitalism ultimately also includes, of course, innovation, but also competition and like pursuit of endless growth. And if we combine that with like personal freedom and so on, it
Mm-hmm.
can just cause also a culture of like where stress and pressure, competitive behavior and material like driven mentalities are very common. And that has, of course, also a negative impact. Well, we see, for example, a mental health crisis, which I think results from all those factors. So there are
Yes.
positive sides, negative sides, but that's how I would generally describe the West to someone who
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't know what the West is actually.
And have you ever misunderstood something in Arab or Islamic culture and then later realized it just was your lens?
That for sure, yeah. I mean, when I was
Mhm.
smaller, I don't know, when I was a teenager, maybe when you watch news and, of course, many news are usually quite negative connotated because headlines are always more interesting if they're traumatic. So, I mean, during that time I was not reading, so I was mainly influenced by what other people told me or what I saw on the TV. And I think many things which, like, what I saw about Islam and like Arab culture back then was all about, for example, what's going on in Iran, like the women protesting because they don't want to get like told what they have to wear, and like that people like the security is like imprisoning women if they are like fighting against the rules which the regime does, or also Taliban, for example, like the violence which we have seen in those countries. So of course I grew up with like scenes which were like connected to violence, to like women are oppressed, like women wearing certain clothes which in Germany were considered as like a sign of oppression of the woman. And that all, of course, was like something which gave me, of course, also certain prejudices or thoughts which were rather negative. But at some point, the more I read about it and the more I talked also to people like who are Muslims, the more I realized that those scenes are actually like, it's all politics, and politics is very different to what's the real life. And I think um, there are many factors where people, like, especially for example with the clothing rules, which were always a big discussion in Germany, where there were even discussions to forbid women who are Muslims to like wear the hijab or something like that. But ultimately, it's everyone's own choice and expression of their faith, and that's something what was really got missing in this discussion. So I think I had those prejudices at the beginning, but the more I talk with people and the more I also read, the more I understood those kind of things from a different point of view, not from the Western lens, what I saw in media. So yeah, I mean, meanwhile, I just say like everyone is allowed and wear and live the way they want to, as long as nobody's getting forced, or like as long as everyone doing it because they believe and think that's the right thing to do. I think there's no discussion worth that we should prevent that.
That's really interesting, and I really love that you are eager to read, to know, and to discuss with people to know the truth of the things.
Yeah, I think that's also a bit of the scientist in me, like
Yes.
ultimately the dream is to understand the things, and the only way to understand is like to talk with people who are like like have a bit more understanding maybe of than what I have, and like to find different ways of like gathering information to make yourself a whole picture, not just listen to other people what they tell you. So I mean that's always what I tell people like who like who I meet and who have like certain thoughts, negative thoughts about other cultures, is like, please just talk with the people and make your own impression. Don't listen to other people who are maybe not very well, like, don't understand those cultures either.
Yes, and I realize that we share the same vision about, for example, when I when I was thinking about my next guest in this episode, one of my goals is to bridge cultures, and you are the first one who is coming from European country, and that's really interesting for me, and I think you you really helped me to reach that goal.
And that's very nice to hear. Yeah, I mean that's also my goal, like for me always the most important has been to make people aware that we should each other face with curiosity, and that we should learn from each other and not just see each other as like competitors or like enemies just because we live in different cultures. Ultimately, every culture itself is interesting and has a certain origin, and we should try to understand each other, and like that's how we could maintain hopefully peace at play at some time in this world, if we would be just more curious about each other than just have more less negative thoughts. So this project, what you have is like, I think one of the most important things which we should tackle as societies. It's like this intercultural communication and like helping each other understand each other.
Yes, I totally agree. So the last question in this theme is, do you think Europe has a moral response or a moral responsibility to our places it once colonized, and how we can maintain to call it a win-win relationship in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Well, I have read a lot about colonialism, and I think I've um, understood that Europe definitely had a very big impact on what happened in the rest of the world, especially in Africa, for example, also Latin America. So I'm definitely agreeing on that we have a certain moral responsibility, um, that we should do everything we can to support the well-being of the people in a certain way. I mean, we cannot directly like how do you say, like intervene. We cannot change governments or something like that, even though that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's like, especially like, for example, helping with building up educational buildings, that we help people accessing medical care and everything related to like building the foundation that people can build up like a meaningful life and can pursue whatever they want to pursue, as we have this privilege here in the Western world, that we are often really having the freedom. And I wish we would do everything to give other people the opportunity as well, especially the countries which we have colonized and where we have caused a lot of damage and a lot of structural changes which are still nowadays visible and abused by powerful people, to the negative consequences of the majority of the society. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, of course, I cannot judge how we do that because I'm not a specialist in that field. But I think education and medical and sanitary like infrastructure is one of the key things, and women rights, and that if those things are provided, it should usually develop itself into like a meaningful society where everyone can pursue in a healthy way their
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yes, and here I just want to raise a point that um, what I mean about a win-win relationship or situation is that um, not build a relationship that built on helping people in Africa or in the Arab region, but I mean how we can maintain a situation that have a shared or mutual benefits, maybe.
Do you mean like intercultural exchange, for example?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's maybe one of the ways that we can build a win-win relationship rather than just receiving something from one side.
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree on that. I mean, I think that is also connected to like that we should see people with other cultures as equally worth, and
Mm-hmm.
that like alone to make those people like on the same level as we would consider us, because of course there's still racistic way of thinking in society in Europe, that certain parts of the world are less worth considering than our societies. And I think if we would all start to see every human being on this planet, doesn't matter which culture he's from or she's from, um, as like equally worth and equally like deserve to live a life which is fulfilling and meaningful, that would be already changing a lot if everyone had the same kind of thinking. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's generally that we have respect of each other and that we consider each other equal humans.
Yes, I agree with you because I'm afraid that nowadays the meaning of colonization it's a little bit uh, changed into receiving help. So yes, so for example, um, I really hope to see a world that built based on natural benefits rather than just receiving help or whatever money fund, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if we look into for example, the aid, what amount of money has actually flown into Africa and how little it has actually changed, I would say like the problem was that we thought like with money we can solve the issue, and as soon as we send money there, things will go better. But that is like that is not how it works, and I think that is a
Yes,
very big
it's not a
misconception.
long-term solution.
No, it's not at all. We need to tackle the
Mhm.
systematic issues, which is first of all that we need to see each other all like have respect of each other and like see each other equal, and then somehow build up on that. But I think just sending money and hoping that things will work better out with that, just to feel yourself better that you have done your part, that doesn't work and will probably not change a lot.
Mhm. Okay, so we are reaching our last theme for today, which is legacy and purpose. So, when your story is told, what do you hope the world remembers you for?
Um, First of all, I think, I mean, for me, the most important is that we understand each other's different perspectives and cultural habits, and that we should all face each other with curiosity and not with fear. That the world is like, that every culture is valuable in its own, and that there's no culture which is less worth than the other, even though we are super different. But actually, this difference and this variety of cultures, languages, and ways of thinking and ways of living is actually something which makes this planet so interesting and makes it awesome to travel around and confront yourself with new ways of living. I think that's something which we all should somehow have to
Mhm.
make this place also like the Earth again a peaceful place. If we would just have all this kind of way of thinking instead of being afraid of other cultures and like having the fear that other people want to take away your culture, which is often just like not true. Um, and that we should just care for each other, that we should have respect of each other, and that we should all see each other like as equal, valuable, and interesting people. So that is something, I mean, if I could send that message to the world and teach everyone that we should
Mhm.
exactly focus on that, and that at some point, whoever talks about me would say like, yeah, this guy was basically indoctrinating me with those kind of thoughts, and I learned from that and I took it serious. I mean, that would be my dream if we could just get more into that.
And now I believe that everyone who is hearing us or will be hearing us later, he will remember you, or she will remember you as someone who are breaking barriers between different worlds or cultures.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, also, I think, I mean, I don't see myself, even though I was born in Germany, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily seeing myself as a German because I love to travel around and actually I really
Mhm.
enjoy to just adapt other cultural thoughts and habits into my own like personality. So my personality is not like a German. It's like a mixture of different kind of influences which I have acquired by living in different countries and like adapting the best things what I think are like each culture is offering. Of course, there are parts of a culture which are always like I don't agree with. That is in Germany,
Mhm.
that is everywhere. Um, so I'm also happy to criticize those things because it's important to make problems aware. But ultimately, I enjoy to have like a mixture of different cultures and learn different languages um, without losing this kind of like thought where I'm from and like that certain values are always important, doesn't
Mhm.
matter which
Yes,
culture it is.
yes, I totally agree with you. And that was our last question for today, Leon. I really enjoyed this episode a lot. I hope you also have the same
Yeah, that
feeling.
was very interesting for me the first time to be part of a podcast. It's actually quite fun. Um, yeah, and it's an important topic. No, I mean it's really something which is like we see in the world is actually very important to address.
Mhm.
This intercultural communication and trying to understand each other. I think that's very important.
So let me to open the group that everyone, if you have any question, just write it down, or I can let you to open the mic. If you have any question, please write it down or just open your mic, please.
You said you're loading that up to YouTube, right?
Yes.
I mean, maybe people ask questions in the YouTube, then they can also, I will answer there as well, of course, if they re-listen to the episode.
Okay. I think when something is recorded, people will prefer to listen to records than being live.
Yeah, that's always like that. That's why in the Troops Club we don't record that, nada, because otherwise we
Yes.
wouldn't have people around.
Yes, I get it now.
Yeah, no, that's a very common theme.
Okay. I don't see any upcoming questions. But yes, maybe they prefer to ask in YouTube comments, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's people are always more, you see that with the Trips Club. I mean, people are
Yes.
always more open to ask questions when it's a bit less live, for example.
Yes. So thank you very much, Leon, for being with me today. I really enjoyed the episode very much.
Me too. Thank you very much for inviting me,
Mhm.
Nada. That was really like a pleasure, and I feel honored to be the first one to talk with you about other cultures. It's really nice.
Thank you very much. And the episode will be recorded, and as a record, I will send it here in Telegram and also in YouTube. So thank you very much. Seeing you all next time.
Yes, thank you, Nada, and enjoy your evening.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.